Hi there, and welcome to Unfiltered Solopreneur, the podcast where we share real, unvarnished stories of people who dared to break free from the corporate grind. I'm your host, Nikhil, and I'm passionate about helping solopreneurs like you turn their dreams into reality. Catherine Quinlan's journey from academia to solopreneurship is all about resilience, creativity, and challenging the status quo. She's rewriting the STEM playbook with a curriculum that's as bold and diverse as the students it serves. Here's what stood out to me from our conversation. Disruption starts with shifting mindsets. We talked about how real disruption isn't just about launching a new product, it's about changing how people think. Without shifting mindsets, even the best innovations won't make an impact. Authenticity is your superpower. Catherine draws inspiration from unconventional success stories like Tyler Perry, proving that being yourself is the ultimate competitive advantage. In a crowded market, authenticity isn't a nice to have, it's what makes you unforgettable. Visibility is more than marketing. Getting noticed isn't just about self promotion, it's about making your mission accessible to the right people. This was a great reminder that clarity in how you communicate your value is just as important as the work itself. Your community is your foundation. Catherine's journey reinforced something I strongly believe. Solopreneurship can be isolating, but the right support system changes everything. So, surrounding yourself with people who challenge, support, and inspire you is non negotiable on this journey. Understanding before action. We both agreed before you build, you need to listen. Deep research and refining your offering based on real audience needs leads to solutions that actually resonate. In a world obsessed with quick wins, thoughtful preparation is your secret weapon. Success is a journey, not a destination. Catherine sees success as an ongoing process of learning and evolving, and I couldn't agree more. Solopreneurship isn't a straight path. It's full of twists and turns, lessons and unexpected wins. The key? Embrace the detours and celebrate the small victories. Join us for this inspiring conversation about rethinking success, challenging conventional wisdom, and creating something that truly matters. Catherine shares how stepping outside traditional frameworks allows you to build something aligned with your own vision on your own terms. See you on the other side. Hello and welcome to a new episode of Unfiltered Solopreneur. I'm Nikhil Vesh, your host, founder, and CEO of BoostSolo. My next guest is a fearless educator turned entrepreneur. She's rewriting the STEM playbook with bold curricula that celebrate diversity and spark curiosity. Catherine, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much, Nikhil. I'm honored to be here.
Well, I'm excited to dive into our conversation. So let me start by asking you now, you've had a pretty incredible career spanning academia, curriculum design, and now entrepreneurship with visibility in STEM. Can I ask you what inspired you to expand your impact, I should say, beyond the traditional academic space by creating a venture like Visibility in STEM?
Gosh, well, it actually happened during the pandemic. I had always had the website Visibility in STEM. But during the pandemic, I knew my goal was always to bridge theory and practice. But I felt more and more the urgency to make sure that children have representative books that they can read. And most of all, the type of books that reflect, in some ways, that integrated not only heritage and culture, but science and kind of, little complex topics with a level of sophistication that I think, being in academia does help with. But, being in academia, I write for academia all the time and get feedback. But this time I felt like I really felt as if I brought a different lens that might not be easily accepted. And so that's when I started to look into self-publishing.
Okay, that's very interesting. And actually, that leads nicely to my second question, because when we first chatted, you told me something interesting, which is you sort of reached a point where you were sort of frustrated, I would say, with the academic constraints, especially around creative freedom. So can you talk a little bit about how those constraints within traditional academia influenced your decision to create a counter mainstream curriculum?
Wow. Well, I think a lot of the constraints really revolve around funding.
Yeah.
Because I don't see my work as being the type of work people necessarily want to fund. People may say they want to fund, DEI, right? Because some aspects of it is catchy. And sometimes it just means that you attend to DEI without necessarily attending to what I consider the root of the problem,
Right.
right? Or really dealing with the problem. And so I think that the problem with my level of creativity is that I take my understanding, my knowledge where it takes me. And sometimes, you don't know what you don't know. And so a lot of my work has been emergent and sometimes difficult to articulate.
Yeah.
And while I hope that what I've accomplished and the reputation that comes with what I've accomplished would help, um, I think that I'm still waiting to see that realized.
Yeah, no, it is. And actually, I was going to ask you sort of like, because when you start on this venture, you sort of have expectations, right? Typically, of what it will be like, that journey. So can you talk a little bit about what your expectations were and sort of what the realities have been? And I think you started to touch on that.
Wow. Well, I think I expected it to be a really long, arduous journey in some ways, um, because I wanted to tackle something that I feel like we still haven't quite tackled, which is how it is that we can include Black representations and innovation in a way that makes it competitive. In other words, um, it brings to the table even what we consider the best cutting edge understandings and learning materials can. And so, um, as I wrote in my book, the support and lack of support came from surprising places. Um, and the truth is, I'm only able to accomplish as much as I have because I've had some measure of support.
Right.
Um, and so, and really that helps to propel me. But I think that it promises to be a bit uphill, mainly because I guess when you create materials that uh might impinge on current thinking, or might even impinge on uh you're trying to sell something, so in some ways it promises to impinge in the financial world, as well as established ways of creating knowledge, then it becomes almost impossible to do it with the level of constraints that I have.
Right. Yeah.
Mhm.
Can you dig a little bit more into that? In terms of like when you say, some of the constraints that you talked about, could you talk a little bit more about, and it sounds like it's going to be disruptive, right? And people struggle with disruption.
So, gosh, um, it's so. I guess a lot of my work take a while to complete,
Hmm.
and even being a professor, it's very difficult to do that while juggling, teaching or grant management and things like that.
Yeah.
You see, when you're being creative, you need to be free to be creative, right? You need to have a certain kind of spirit that comes with a level of happiness and joy and freedom.
Right.
And so, I've had a lot of decision making to do. I've really tackled with, do I want to leave academia altogether to focus on this? Do I want to almost resign to be, I don't want to say the pauper, but to just escape in a little bit of a space so that I can create, and how can I free myself from, um, it's funny. I'm thinking of quote the shackles that bind,
Mm.
so to say, or the emotional or the metaphorical. Um, I think that curricular work is very hard work.
Yeah.
I see it being done frequently by people without the level of expertise that I have, without much of pay and rewards. And so, escaping into this space where you have companies, really my competition is an impossible competition, right? Because you're talking about companies, produces these. They're vetted by other larger companies, um, or sometimes by academic institutions, which people have the opportunity um, to gauge in certain level of entrepreneurship. And I'm thinking of the widely used, that's come under fire recently, Lucy Calkin, right? It influenced reading. But there's a level of support there that um, that I often fear that someone with my predisposition wouldn't necessarily have.
Right.
In order to move that forward, because you need a team. You need a team. And so
Yeah.
that's something I've been working on building. I did have an opportunity to gather a team to apply for, an innovation grant that I was invited to apply. And we'll see. I do have concerns because I'm beginning to see a trend in the whole grant process that I've seen even people, um, you know, people like myself, black females, talk about, you know,
Yeah.
um, especially when it comes to writing big proposal and putting your ideas out there, right? And wondering if it'll be funded or if it'll be used, right?
Right.
So I think that's always a big concern. But, I mean, ideas themselves aren't necessarily copyrightable. So it's, I bring more than the ideas. It has to be put together.
Yeah, no, and it is a tough challenge, like you said, right? And I think you said it was a long road because there are entrenched interests, and there's very sort of
Mhm.
conventional thinking. And I think we talked about this, but healthcare and education are probably the two least disrupted industries that still exist, right? In terms of the new digital world that we live in and in terms of, change. So I totally understand that. And there was actually, sorry, go ahead. Were you going to say something?
I was trying to figure out what you meant by least disruptive, and I was almost going to say, "Yep, don't say that so loudly," because
Disrupted. I'm saying disrupted. There hasn't been as much disruption, I'm saying, in education and
Mm,
in
okay.
healthcare, right? That's what I was talking about because every other industry has pretty much been disrupted. Business models have changed, the ways of working have changed, the ways of thinking have changed, the applications have changed, right? Because of technology. But these are two, at least in from my view, and I may be wrong, you could correct me, but I don't feel like they've really changed much from
Mhm.
the way they were.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. I mean, I don't know so much that, it's interesting because education works for those for whom it was created for better, right? And so, people in that environment who can afford to pay or who have the level of, can hire the level of expertise. Um, in some ways, you could say it's working, right? If we were to assume it was working, of course, there are things, nothing is perfect. But I think that what I'm trying to disrupt is not so much the model as much as the thinking that goes into the model, right? And so that's where it becomes a little harder, because I'm really I'm targeting the thinking process. I'm targeting the motives behind the thinking. I'm targeting what makes that foundation, you know, and what makes that inequitable for someone like me, or for our children. And so, because nothing really is going to be disrupted without changing our thinking, which is the most difficult thing, right?
Yeah, no, very true. And
You,
it's probably the most difficult thing to change also, right?
yeah, I mean, you
Yeah.
can change a model and then you still have the
Yeah,
same thinking, and then we're in the same place.
right.
So it's for us, it's you can change a model and we'll still be in the same place. So I'd really like to take it beyond changing the model. Uh, but if we want it to work for everyone, we probably will do that.
Yeah, no, I starting to understand what you're saying. It's a complex issue, right? So,
It
uh,
is.
it was interesting to me that you talked about rooting your counter mainstream curriculum in authenticity, and
Oh,
you said it's sort of like Tyler Perry and how he built his early career
okay,
in an
great.
authentic way, which was very counter mainstream.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Very counter mainstream, and even the way his way of getting there is counter mainstream. And in a way, when I look at it, it's his way of getting there, led him to build, right? Build
Right.
something upon which he can build something. And I even was looking at his more recent movies to see how that's emerged. And so it's building something based on your understanding of the world, um, not someone else's understanding of the world. But also, I think that I'm in a unique position because I've spent years, because one, I have a science background, and I've spent years researching. I've spent years teaching, and years really thinking of things from an applied cognitive perspective. Um, Thinking of what can I put together that would be useful, that students can read, that might become something else. Building of anything that's foundational, anything infrastructure like is challenging.
Sure. Yeah.
And part of that entails building content.
Hmm.
Which is kind of what I played with. I know I purposely used one of the paragraphs in my book to kind of play with that idea of what can this exploration look like, and how might it be different? What can this different content look like, and things like that. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
So I'm just curious though. So how do you, in terms of getting the message out there, it's a pretty unique approach, right? That you're advocating. So how do you pitch it to potential clients? Or how do you, who are used to a traditional curriculum model, for example? How do you get the word out there, and how do you sort of talk about it?
Wow. Well, I guess I need to start talking about it more. And that's the issue. I need to, and um, I should say I'm inspired to. I did start doing some recordings that I'm going to, put on social media. And my goal is to also launch a podcast that focuses on learning, because and to bring that expertise and understanding. Um, I was recently approached, and I'm hoping this works out. Someone approached me and invited me to um, just talk to parents in the community about some of what I'm doing, which is what I had hoped for. I'd really hoped. But to answer your question, it's something I'm still trying to figure out, because we go with what's popular,
Yeah.
and we go with what's appealing. Um, I know that I've had a few teachers read it and give me feedback, and I even had actually one professor who invited me to. I was on a radio show, and they gave me some good feedback about, you know, one, they're thinking was, oh, where were you all my life in terms of learning about themselves, learning about their culture, and reading. and, having some magical, mystic type of adventure happening mixed in with the science. And so I needed time to attend to that, and that's
Right.
part of, being in academia makes it really difficult to actually, make the time to interface with the community and the public. And so those are my next steps. My next steps are to, make decisions and choices to free myself to, so that I can take this to the next step on the next level.
Yeah, no, I get that. And I mean, I'll admit I'll be out of my depth here in terms of both education and STEM and science. But what's interesting to me is like what you just said a minute ago is getting the message out there is important, right? Because change
Mhm.
is scary for anyone. And even
Right.
changing thinking is probably scarier. But when you start talking about it and you sort of bring down people's defenses, like you just said a minute ago, as you talk about it, you make it
Mhm.
less scary because it's just a different way of thinking. It's not better or worse, or you know what I mean? It's like because people
Right.
get very comfortable with a way of thinking. You mentioned
Absolutely.
and it's changes always brings discomfort, right? So I think getting the message out there, and so to that end also, and I'm rambling a little bit here, but your books, are they are they a result of this new curriculum?
Well, yes, absolutely. Not just this new curriculum. I wrote the books based on my experience with creating different curricula. Like the first one, I had done some research looking at African rock art
Yeah.
and trying to figure out how you can use an interdisciplinary approach. Mainly looking at African rock art as a cultural asset, right? Not only for Africans, and we know you have Native American rock art too.
Right.
And so I wrote a paper on that. And so I used that understanding and background and did a little bit more historical research to create my first type of magical book. And so those are the series that's the Keystone Passage series. Um, so that was the first. And then the second one, I used to teach a course called Life in Space. Um, I taught this course repeatedly for a couple of years, and I used my understanding of what I talk about related to microgravity, related to, that right around that time when I taught that course was when the twins went into space and was looking at what happens if one of them, the changes in DNA and things like that and comparing. So, those are things I used to talk about in my course. And so I kind of captured some of that and inserted it into the book, as they discovered different things. So there's a science behind that, and had to do a little bit of, and and I also kind of mentioned Ed Dwight there as well, because when I first started this work, I didn't interview. I spoke with him in the hopes that I'd be funded to interview, but it didn't work out at the time. And so, and for those who don't know, Ed Dwight is the first African American to train to be an astronaut.
Oh
Um,
wow, I didn't know that.
6 days, yeah, but he never made it. It was very controversial. Um, and so his story was one of the ones I stumbled upon when I was trying to you know, figure things out. This was around 2016.
Right.
So the third book is based on my most recent research, and that particular, it's I didn't really, it's not it's inspired, I should say, inspired by that research, and so that was an NSF funded project. But what I did was I did some further research into culture that I learned. And so that one, Traveling Through the Trees, it's, interesting. I think that's my favorite because I spent so much time trying to do things a little differently with the magic and learning about, a little bit of history and culture and understanding, you know, the advantages, for example, of why, uh, some different African people built. home in the mountain, for example, right? Because the horses couldn't get them.
Right.
And so things like that, you learn a little bit of culture, a little bit of science, a little bit of, um, every day. And so, I think that, so yeah, so in some ways, I would say it was inspired by having that background
Yeah.
because I'd written these papers and done these research. So, you know, yeah, related and unrelated at the same time.
Right. And so you mentioned also sort of getting feedback and sharing, what you develop with people. Have you had to sort of pivot your message a little bit to help it resonate better with audiences? Have you found to reshape it or how you present it?
When I guess there are twofold answers to that. When I was preparing, I trained with, um, I took classes with Storyteller Academy, and especially during the pandemic, and I retrained each time and took classes each time. And I was fortunate also to be able to interact with some children's author who gave me feedback. And then the third one, it was really nice. They did a nice job of grouping us where there were a few of us, Black women, were in the group. I remember one was a Black doctor, overseas, which was nice. So we were at different time zones and all over the U.S. and so it was nice. I think, and we just gave each other feedback. But to answer your other part of your question in terms of changing the message and things like that, not really. I think people have been really receptive who I've had the opportunity to speak with. Um, and interestingly, parts of the stories have resonated with people, especially when I, talk to, for example, former students. Um, the stories, there's a commonality in the stories, which is what I was seeking when it comes to the African diaspora. That no matter where we are, there are things that are important to us.
Right.
And there's a way of thinking that's important to us. Um, as far as the story itself, I think that I don't yet know. Well, I shouldn't say that. I've had friends' kids read it and they were excited. They were excited to read it and they were excited to see themselves in the book.
Yeah.
Um, but the entrepreneurial journey when it comes to this, I have to say, uh, the marketing part I haven't had time to do. I
Sure.
just pretty much took the summers to write the book, and then work starts again, and then there's no time.
So let me ask you then, the books, while you talk about it's obviously aimed at the African diaspora, but I imagine it's for everyone, right? For everyone to learn more about the African diaspora also.
Absolutely,
Yeah. Okay.
absolutely, um, absolutely. Hmm.
Okay. Good. And so how do you on this journey? This is a lonely journey. Now you're up against probably tougher, more established systems than sort of the average solopreneur, right? I think it's fair to say. So how do you handle moments of self-doubt when you're sort of pushing against this system? Like you said, it's a well-entrenched system that's in place and tough to fight.
Wow. Um, how do I handle moments of self-doubt? Well, I think one of the things that's helping me is I'm in a I'm in I've taken several business accelerator programs,
Yeah.
and the one I'm currently in, um, they really do a good job of teaching me to think about how to reach people. Um, and I've really begun to see this as a journey. Um, I don't know where the destination is. I don't know where it'll end up. I think that the only thing that matters about this for me that I remind myself is that it's a journey worth traveling. It's a journey that is important and is important to me. Um, Repeated evidence is showing its importance. I am constantly reminded, and I guess, and I hate to say that this is necessarily the nudge I need, but it's not. Um, I look at, when I listen to the stories, things happening to our Black children, and seeing the um the emotional havoc, right?
Yeah.
Within our schools. Um, I think that I think it's going to continue. It's going to continue, and I tell myself that when we're ready for the real solution, I'll be here, right?
Right.
I'd like to at least have, created a series not only of books but also accompanying curricula, and be able to have the time. Um, I see it as being worth um, the cost, the energy, um, and commitment.
Yeah.
Um, so how do I keep myself going? I think I have a good supportive network. My husband is very supportive. My family is very supportive. Friends, who I talk to, I think that they really help to keep me going.
Yeah, no, you're right. I mean, it's a noble cause, but it's important to have a network of people who will be there to support you, right? Because as I said, it is a very lonely journey. And also, you said something earlier, which was that you've gotten some support from unlikely quarters, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. And I'm in several groups. Mainly two I'm thinking of. One network that are really focusing on looking at futuristic perspectives. It's different from my goals, but everyone there, really, we have a common goal. And
Hmm.
I'm also and we wrote one paper together, the Rec Network. And then I'm also in another group of Black women. We just completed a paper together, and we all have the same goals, and so we've been a source of support for each other, through the, writing and talking and encouraging each other, and actually even another group, several groups of, I think that's really what's helped, keep me going as well, and keep us emotionally supporting each other. It's just knowing we're all pretty much going through something similar, and in trying to go against the grain.
Right. Well,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm sure. I mean, it's probably small consolation, but you've gotten some positive feedback too, right, along the way. So for
Oh,
people who've seen it and
absolutely.
reacted to it, so I think it's great. I think it's important work that you're doing. Um,
Thank you.
and so what advice would you give to aspiring solopreneurs, especially those in the education sector, who are looking to make a social impact?
Wow. Solopreneurs looking to make a social
Or like
impact.
yourself, who are starting a venture, right? What would you tell them based on your journey so far and what you've learned?
Sure. Well, I think of two things. One, take the time to train. There's a lot of value in research, and research changes your mind. Research changes your understanding, and just allow yourself to emerge, so that so you understand really what you want to do. I know for me, it took a while to really, being creative and being innovative is a journey. And sometimes the end, you know, if we know the end before we start, then it just meant it was a different journey.
Right.
And then, I don't know what that means for growth, but I think the second thing is take the time to understand business.
Yeah.
Because I've seen over and over again where people, um, pitch things without understanding what you're pitching and how to pitch, and I see the disconnect with them thinking, oh, I have something, but not having that come across because they still are in the developing phases, or in developing stages. So, take the time to develop your talent, um, and take the time to train to understand business and entrepreneurship, because it's a journey and it's not for everyone.
Yeah, that's true. And that's really good advice because you're right, because no matter how noble your cause might be, you still have to have a business perspective, right, to bring it to life. So I think
Absolutely.
those two things sort of go hand in hand. So I think that's really valuable advice. So let me ask you, then, Catherine, if we were to meet 5 years from now, have another conversation, what would success look like for you? Can you define that a little bit, both personally and professionally?
Wow, what a great question. 5 years from now. Well, I would have done 5 years of my podcast.
Yeah.
um, and about learning with another book for learning. And along the way, creating curricula products with my team, and taking my 3 books and creating more books and turning it into a 3D CGI movie that maybe is featured on Netflix.
I love it. And building the brand and marketing, right? My favorite part.
Building the brand and marketing and having, you know, either some type of network or a platform that students can access and teachers can access the data, um, and the lessons. Hmm.
I look forward to seeing it on Netflix. You can count me in. So, is there anything we haven't discussed or haven't asked you that you'd like to share with our audience?
Wow. Yeah, I can't think of anything.
Okay, no problem. I like to end with a little rapid fire round. So I'm just going to throw a couple of questions at you, Catherine, and whatever comes to mind, just give it to us. Um, if your entrepreneurial journey were a book, what would the title be?
I would call it, I'm gonna reveal my next goals. I would call it The Power of Motivated Thinking.
Okay. What's the most surprising place you found inspiration for your work?
Well, other than my son, I would say, Disney, because I like fairy tales, and so, and it inspires me to create and to wonder what it would look like if this was created from our perspective. And so my goal is to create our own fairy tale.
Like your books.
Yes.
Yeah. I love that. If you
Yeah.
could design your dream curriculum without limitations, what's the first topic you'd include?
Okay. So I would talk about food.
Hmm.
Um, I mean, because we eat it every day. Uh, if we eat poorly, it doesn't serve us well. We get medicines from food. And so that's really what I would like to develop further. Hmm.
Yeah, I think that's important. And again, like you said, we spend so much time eating, thinking about food, and dealing with food, and yet we know very little about it.
Yeah.
What's one piece of advice you'd give your younger self, fresh out of college?
Wow. get some help. I would say, see your therapist early, just to get you to emotionally develop and become aware of yourself. Because I grew up so sheltered that being sheltered and being a Black woman does not go hand in hand. And so I would say, yeah.
Yeah, I would say that before your solopreneur journey, also do one more round of that. So, what if you had no actually, what's one book or movie that most inspires your vision for inclusivity in STEM,
A book or movie that inspires my.
other than your book?
Oh, wow. Well, I guess the most immediate one I think about is Hidden Figures.
Yeah.
I'm just really inspired to dish up all the hidden figures. And yeah.
Well, that's a beautiful way to end the show, and I think I power to you for, and I hope you dish up all the hidden figures and we see them on Netflix. So,
Absolutely.
Catherine, it's been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for being on the show.
Oh, thank you so much, Miguel. I had fun too.
That wraps up another episode of Unfiltered Solopreneur. I would love to hear your thoughts about today's conversation. Let's continue the discussion in the comments below or on LinkedIn at BoostSolo. If you're looking to connect with like-minded solopreneurs and take your business to the next level, join our BoostSolo community. And if you're ready to turn your expertise into a story that sells, book a free strategy session at boostsolo.com. Remember, your story is your most valuable asset. Live solo or die corporate.